It come to me this morning as we were singing. I remember a few months ago when we couldn't sing, and the beautiful sound of the congregation and the family of God coming together in one mind and one accord and singing out the beautiful songs of the Lord. This morning we read out of 1 Kings chapter 18. We know that Elijah went and he declared a drought where it would not rain until he said it would rain. I thought this morning that before we get into the message, we're not doing our children's moment with the pastor. And yes, I've heard your comments about sometimes we enjoy the children's moments more than we do the message, but that's not correct. See how many people laughed? What are some of the difficulty, children? What are some of the difficulties of being a leader? To lead someone somewhere, what do you first have to know? Yes, ma'am. Leadership. You first got to know, you have to know where you're going. Have you ever tried to teach somebody something that you didn't know how to do yourself? Or maybe you wanted to give directions how to get to Boaz, but you had no idea how to get to Boaz. It makes it very difficult. What are one of the drawbacks of being a leader? Look where you are right now, and look where I am. How many people are looking at you? If anybody is, you're paranoid. But how many people are looking at me? Everyone. So the problem and the good and bad about being a leader is, good thing is everybody gets to see you. The bad thing is everybody gets to see you. And as long as you make correct decisions, that's wonderful. But when you make incorrect decisions, that's terrible. So being a leader sometimes is very rewarding, but sometimes it becomes very scary. In 1 Kings, Elijah declared the drought. And the people began to get hungry because the drought had taken a toll. All the grass was gone. All the herbs of the field were gone. Everything was gone. A lot of the animals had starved to death and died. And needless to say, it did not fit well with the people. So Elijah come to a point. God was trying to prove a point. So Elijah went to Ahab. And he told him, he said, bring out 450 prophets of Baal. He said, bring out 450 prophets of Asherah. And bring them down, and we're going to create a sacrifice. And so they built up the altar, and the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah went down there and they built the altar and they laid the sacrifice on it. And Elijah told them, he said, now cry out to your God. And whichever God answers, we'll just let them be God. And so the prophets of Baal went down, they laid out the altar, they laid the sacrifice on the altar, and they began to pray. They began to call out. And Elijah, I think, had a mean streak going through him. He began to make fun of them. He said, well, maybe your God's meditating right now. Maybe he's asleep. How long has it been since your God had a good vacation? Maybe he's just on the beach. Well, that's a picture. Anyway, and so the prophets of Baal began to cut themselves. Having blood running out of their hands, don't do that. Out of their arms, they began to cry. They got desperate. And they began to cry out the louder and the louder and the louder and the louder. And Elijah kept on just tempting them, going, maybe he's dead. And it got to a point to where Elijah could see the look on the prophets. Now think about this. These are not common people. These are people that have given their whole life, everything about their being, to be a prophet of Baal. And when they started Elijah started seeing the desperation on their face when they realized that the false god was not going to answer, nor could a false thing answer. So you begin at the start of it where they're, show them God, just show them, show Elijah, show him. And then it gets to, God, come on. God, please come on. And then it gets to, what have I done with my life? Where is my God when I need Him the most? Elijah built back the altar and he laid the sacrifice back on it. And he told them, he said, dig a trench around the sacrifice, around the altar. And so they dug a trench around the altar. And he said, I want you to know that this is not some mediocre thing that's about to happen. He said, take and pour a barrel of water on the sacrifice. And so they did. And Elijah, he sat there a minute and he looked at the sacrifice and he said, not good enough. He said, pour another barrel on the sacrifice. So they poured another barrel of water on the sacrifice. After a few moments, he maybe started toward it and he said, no. He said, go ahead and pour another barrel of water on the sacrifice. We're going to alleviate any doubt whatsoever. So here Elijah is standing before 900 prophets of another God, and all of Israel looking at him, and they're all looking at Elijah. Elijah is fixing to do something that is miraculously powerful, or he's fixing to make a fool out of himself in front of everybody. That's the problem with being a leader. He was about to accomplish one of those. Elijah stepped up to the altar and he cried out to God, the scriptures that we read. He cried out to God, God, don't make me famous. He didn't say, Lord, do this for me. He said, God, do this for the people that they might know that they're living a lie and they're serving a wrong God. So Elijah prayed, and the Bible said that fire fell from heaven and it consumed the entire offering. It consumed the stones that were around it, which made up the altar. It consumed every drop of water that was in the ditch that they had dug around it. So Elijah, as God answered, it consumed everything there, and there was nothing but a hole there where once was a rock altar, a sacrifice, and a water. And the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Assyria looked up and they said, let the God of Elijah be God. He is God. There is no other God besides Him. So we see that Elijah, let me put this in today's modern thinking. Let's say we had a man, woman, and or child, it doesn't matter, who did not have any legs from the knees down. Okay? Whether they were amputated or whether they would never develop. Just to say we have a person that their lower extremities stop at their knees. And think about this. Church, I want y'all to gather around and watch, because I'm fixing to pray over this person. And when I get through praying, they're not only going to have legs, but they're going to have ankles. They're going to have feet, and they're going to have 10 toes. What's the thoughts going through your mind right now? He's crazy. But what if I could do it? Through the grace of God and the power and manifestation of God, what would it be like to see an adult, man, woman, or child who did not have this, and I proclaimed that, watch this, we're going to do this, and you're going to be able to see it. Number one, I'm putting myself in a place that is very precarious. Because if God answers, I'm going to be Elvis with hair and everything. I mean, everybody's going to want to touch me. Brother Mark, touch my children. Brother Mark, do this, brother. But if God doesn't answer, I could never preach here again. I become a fool, a laughing stock. not only for your generation, but you will tell your kids, and they'll tell their grandkids, and they'll say, remember, do you remember that preacher? Right? Elijah declared, build the altar up, put the sacrifice on it, pour 3 barrels of water on it. I'm fixing to show you who God is. Guys, that's stepping high. And so Elijah prayed out that God, they might be able to see. And so God answered it, licked every bit of it up, the offering, the water, the stones of the altar, everything up. So everything was gone. And everyone looked at Elijah going, what a man of God. What a person of God. If he can do this, if God will listen to him do this, what would God not listen to? Can he raise the dead? Can he part the Red Sea? What can he not do? That was the 18th chapter and the 36th verse through 39th verse of 1 Kings. 18th chapter, 36. Now, let's look at 1 Kings, the 19th chapter. The very next chapter. We're talking about 4 scriptures difference. Put it on the screen. 19 and 1. And Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. So we haven't left the story. Also, how he had executed all the prophets with a sword. Yeah, once they accepted God as God, he killed every one of them. And then Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, so let the gods, notice the little g, that is not God, our God, that is the gods, do to me and more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. So Jezebel said, let the gods, the false gods, let them kill me. She said, if you're taking breath at this time tomorrow, I pray that the gods kill me. In other words, you've had it. I'm going to do everything I can do. If it means sending every soldier from the whole Far East over there, she said, by the breath that's in my body, you're going to be dead. And when he saw that, this is Elijah, he arose and he ran for his life. And went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Wow. I don't think in all of my 52 years I've ever heard anyone say anything good about their boss. If you're a boss, I'm sorry. I don't think I've heard anybody say anything good about the owners. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything good about their supervisors or their immediate supervisors, because we all know that anybody that's above me is lacking in intelligence, right? How many times have we sat in a lower seat going, my gosh, I got to count this stuff again. I just counted it last week. He's an idiot. If you want to find someone that's lacking knowledge, you find a person that is a leader. Because everyone thinks they could do so much better of a job if only they were in. If Brother Ricky, I could do such a better job. And then COVID hit, and I said, thank God Brother Ricky's there, because it's a nightmare. Until it really gets hard, we can always do better than someone over us. But when it really gets hard, it's just like I told a guy, a church member was aggravating me one day, and he said, well, I tell you what, I wish I only worked one day a week. like you. And I said, well, won't you come and take a vacation day and go with me? He said, I may do that. Where are you going? I said, there's a stillborn born in Gadsden Regional right now. I'm fixing to go in and be with mom and daddy. He said, I think I'll just deliver the mail. Being where someone is easy to judge if we're not in those shoes. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the contrast of standing before 900 prophets of Baal and stepping out on faith that God was going to answer so that everybody will be able to see that God is God. What an awesome person of God. What a powerful person of God to stand up in the middle of a drought where people are starving to death and have all of these prophets and put God on the showcase. To be that man, to be that person, man or woman, it doesn't matter, to be that person and go, hey, listen, call your kids, call your grandkids, call anybody you want to know. There's fixing to be a miracle of God that's fixing to take place. And then Jezebel says, I'm going to kill you. And he runs and hides under a broom tree and asks God to kill him. God, I've had enough. So he wasn't afraid of 900 prophets, but he was afraid of one Jezebel, one woman, one person. I thought this morning that people have come to me and asked me, how do you preach in front of a lot of people? I have, at one time, probably 800-900 people. It didn't bother me a bit. The difference of the whole story was that God had told Elijah to go do what he told him to do about the rain, the lack thereof, the drought. God had told him to put him to the test. God hadn't said anything to him about Jezebel. I can stand up through God's grace. I can stand up here and preach a message in front of 1,000 people. I think I've got close to that at times. But I went down to the city council meeting a couple of weeks ago, and they told me that I was speaking. I was soaking wet with sweat. And when I got to the microphone, my voice was trembling. I wanted the speed breaker on Obrig because they're driving too fast. And I don't know if it made any sense to them at all. You say, Brother Mark, you can stand in front of a lot of people and preach the gospel, but you can't just get up and say, people are driving too fast on Obrig, we need a speed breaker. And they're not going to do it, by the way. Anyway. When I was 18, I made my first purchase. I purchased a 1987 Yamaha Model 4 four-wheeler. Had a lower and high range. Loved that thing. Me and my friends, we had trails that we would ride. Nearly got killed on it multitude of times. But one day, I was leading the pack. Number one, I didn't know where I was going. So it's hard to lead if you don't know where you're going because there's several branches that the trails branch off. And I was just shooting for the one that was used the most. We went around a curve. And all of them, we were flying. All of them were right behind me. Stopped right there. In the 1970s, my sister started dating. And back then, it was a drive-through. Ask your parents what that is. Anyway, a drive-in. I'm sorry, not a drive-through. But a drive-in. And I had to go with them. And in the 70s, like 74, 77, there was a movie come out called Kingdom of the Spiders. It has tormented me my entire life. There were tarantulas trying to get under the door. They were falling down into the fireplace. And the last thing about the movie is this giant one, the size of the World Trade Center, was walking and the town was covered in cobwebs. And ever since that day, I have been terrified of spiders. Yes, I will hurt you. I will knock you down and step on you if one gets on me. So I'm leading this pack of four-wheeler, and the spider web wraps all the way around my head, and there's a 35-pound spider doing this. And I went to beating my face. That's why I look the way I do. And I almost ran off a cliff. Cliff didn't bother me. Spider is going to kill me. Patsy's thinking right now, are you going to tell the story? Yes, I am. When we first got married, I was working a secular job, and I worked 2 to 10, so I would get home about 10:30. We had a camper on the edge, just right up against a trailer right up against the edge of the woods, and it was in the fall. And she was already in the bed, and because she worked first shift, so I sneak in, get in the shower, and I had hair back then, and I washed my hair, and when I opened my eyes, one of those brown garden spiders was about that far from my nose. And I screamed like a 5-year-old girl. I just got through washing my hair. And I mean, it was just, I opened my eyes and there it was. It was 78 pounds if it weighed an ounce. And so here I am, I'm in the shower, so you know I'm not clothed. I am in the standing fetal position in the back of the shower. About that time, Patsy rips open the shower, true story, took a flip-flop and went, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but it pretty much meant, now shut up, I'm trying to sleep. She didn't say that, but that's pretty much to the effect. And I thought to myself, if a bear was to attack my family, it would have to kill me first. If robbers were to attack my home, they would have to kill me first. If we ever had an invasion of the spiders, y'all are on your own. And Elijah, you kind of find him like that because Elijah was one of the greatest prophets in the Old Testament, but one day he's a powerful, powerful man of God that God listens to. And listen, God didn't answer his prayer in a day, a week, a month, or we'll just wait and see if it gets better. God answered his prayer on command. God, send down the fire from heaven that these people might be able to see it. More much, do it now. And fire comes down from heaven, consumes the altar, consumes the rocks, consumes the water. But when somebody threatened his life, he took his servant, dropped him off wherever he could drop him off. And he ran up into the wilderness, sat down under a broom tree, and begged God to kill him. It's kind of like someone being the entrepreneur of a multi-million-dollar company and making one bad decision and all the employees and stockholders thinks he's an idiot. Guys, it is hard when you're a leader. It's hard to be perfect all the time. It's hard to make the right decision all the time. If you got teenage kids, you better not make a wrong decision in front of them, because you will never hear the end of it. Daddy, you remember that time? Yes, I do. It's hard to put trust in someone. You have a doctor. He better be right with the medication or I won't go back. You have a lawyer that just because they didn't fill out one little form or check a box, he's not worth anything or she's not worth anything. You have a preacher that has a moment of being scared or a moment of not knowing what to do, then we're fed up with him. We want a new one. Sometimes our husbands and our wives, if they make one bad decision, maybe they spend a little bit too much money. We want to take a checkbook away. We can't trust you with anything. Maybe if the dad makes a wrong turn and ends up down a dirt road somewhere, all of a sudden, you want me to drive? So many times it's so easy to give up on leaders when they have weakness and we realize that they're not perfect. But then again, the only ones that are perfect are the ones that sit down and do nothing, because they never make a bad decision. Could you imagine the disciples when Jesus came walking on the water? It said all of them were afraid, and they said, "We're going to die. It's a spirit." And Jesus said, "No, it's me. Don't be afraid." And all the apostles are sitting there in the boat. And Peter said, "Lord, if that's you, bid me to come." Jesus said, "Come." Wonder what the other 11 thought. He's fixing to die. You're nuts. It's a perfectly good boat. What are you doing? You had the best spot on the boat. What are you doing taking that risk, getting out there? But later on, where do we find Peter? I don't know him. I'm sure I saw you with him. No. And I seen that guy too. He looks a lot like me. No, I'm sure it's you. Peter began to curse. I promise you, I don't know this man named Jesus. Then he heard a cock crow. So Peter's not worth anything anymore. He's a coward, a chicken. He's not a leader. But then you get over into Acts. Peter stands up. Filled with the Holy Spirit. He said, "Men and brethren, it is this same Jesus whom you crucified." Peter becomes the leader of all of them. I thought this morning that church never judge a person by one decision in their life, and never judge a person, especially a leader, until you walked a mile in their shoes. At all the churches, I can't do it here, but all the churches I've ever pastored, whoever was leading Vacation Bible School had to have an apprentice that walked with them. And then the next year, the apprentice would be the Vacation Bible School leader, and then they would have an apprentice that walked with them. There's a reason why Paul had Timothy. There's a reason why Elijah had Elisha. There's a reason why it's hard to find leadership. Next Sunday, I would like for one of you to preach. Or I would like for you to stand here and teach a lesson. .9% of you said, "I won't be here." Not only am I not going to do it, I won't even come just in case I will have to do it. I thought this morning, when you look at all aspects of life, someone has to make the hard decisions. Someone has to stand up there and say, "Here's what we need to do." And the odds of them being correct all the time, and unless their initials are JC, is slim and none. But the thing I want you to understand this morning as we wrap this up, Elijah, even though he stood there and was a great man of God calling fire down, he also run for his life. But in a few minutes, if you'll keep reading, he done some miraculous things in God's name. Peter stepped out of a boat that the other 11 wasn't willing to, but then again he turned around and denied that he even knew Jesus, even cursed, saying he didn't know him. But it was Peter that stood up. If you'll notice, now some of you's going to get upset with this one. It was Jesus that walked on water. It was Jesus that brought the dead to life. It was Jesus that healed the withered hand. But it was also Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane saying, "Father, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass." Jesus didn't know anything about death. He never had been a part of the death of the body, the death of anything. He brought life everywhere he went to. And when it come down to a point where he was fixing to lead us captives free. Jesus said, Father, if there's any other way. You say, was that sin? No, it was the humanity that was in Him. Guys, we do, and gals, we do the best we can. Kids, your mamas and daddies are doing the best they can. And they're making decisions to the best of their ability from what their parents taught them, what their grandparents taught them, and what they've watched Oprah. Hopefully they don't. But anyway, if they make a wrong decision, it's not because they set out to make a wrong decision. Being a leader's hard. It's hard. But there's nothing more beautiful. I'm going to say this. Gosh. If you're the owner of a company, you probably invested a lot of time, sweat, tears, and probably at some point risked everything you had to get there. If you're the foreman of a company or the manager, you probably, same thing. If you're a mom and dad, I want you to know, kids, that your mom and dad lost nights of sleep. Your grandparents have lost nights of sleep toiling over the decisions that they make that affect you. The most beautiful thing, I heard this on the phone the other day. My youngest daughter was talking to Patsy, and Patsy talks to her on the speakerphone. Patsy's wadded up in a knot. Oh my gosh, what's he fixing to say? One of my big things was, hey, shut the door. The heat's on, the air conditioner's on. Turn that light out. Well, she had just got married a few months ago, and they're traumatized. They got a $200 power bill. $200. She said, I heard her tell her mama, she said, all I can think about is every time Daddy would say, shut the door. She didn't get it then. My family has a bad, they'll tell each other bye with the door wide open. They'll open the door and go, hey, we love y'all, we'll see. Hey, don't forget that casserole dish. Yeah, and you're sitting there going, it's 98 degrees outside. Please shut it. And you try to hide it. You try to, don't do it. Don't. See, you're laughing because it happens at your house too. But it's when, you know, some of the scariest times of our lives is when Mom and Daddy die and we realize we're next up to bat. When you realize that you're walking in the same shoes that your daddy used to walk in and you're having to make those decisions. Hey, Daddy, I've got this. Is this car worth spending this money on, or do I just need to trade it in on another car? What do you think? And I want to say, well, let me call. I can't. Being a leader's hard, but the reward, I pray that one day I get to stand in heaven and watch the souls walk in the glory that I had a little something to do with as they accepted Him. So you mamas and daddies post pictures of graduations not because you're that cute. It's because they've poured everything into you that they could pour into you, and they're proud not only of you, but they're a little bit proud of themselves. Being a leader's hard, and you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to make a stand. And you have to be willing to make a fool out of yourself just to lead people to where they can be prosperous in this world. Stand with us this morning. I invite you to come and pray. If you're a leader or about to become a leader or wrestling with a leader, why do you think we can't find Sunday school teachers? Why do you think we have probably, I think there's 150 churches right now in our district And we probably got 30 of them with supply pastors. Why do you think it's so hard to find people to lead? Because it's tough. So, Brother Mark, God ain't called me to be a leader. Well, if He hadn't called you to be a leader, then please